Hello, and welcome to Cut Through the Noise. Cut Through the Noise is the podcast that helps business leaders increase sales through elevated communications and marketing. I'm your host, Aisling O'Rourke, the founder of The Communications Coach. We are a company that helps business leaders speak with confidence and clarity in your marketing messages. And I am delighted to be joined by you today. In this season of Cut Through the Noise, we are focusing in on artificial intelligence, how to use it, what we might be getting benefits from out of it, and how to do so while still maintaining our voice, the human touch. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to communications and marketing in particular, it's that human touch that helps our brands stand out from the crowd and really and truly cut through the noise. I'm particularly excited about today's episode because I'm joined by Tom Hewitson of General Purpose. Now, Tom is an AI expert and has trained thousands of people in how to use AI ethically, safely, and to really get bang for buck out of it too. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, so much so that this episode is going to be a little bit longer than usual, but I hope you understand why. So please do enjoy my conversation with Tom Hewitson of General Purpose. Tom, thank you very much for fitting us into your busy schedule. For people who aren't familiar with you and with General Purpose, in a nutshell, what is it that you do in relation to artificial intelligence?
Well, hi, Ashton. Thank you so much for having me on. And thank you for fitting me into your busy schedule as well. So General Purpose is the UK's oldest and I like to think leading AI training school. We go into organizations and upskill people on how to use AI safely and ethically and effectively. I personally have trained well over 1,000 people, probably several thousand people at this point, and that gives me a really kind of nice, like in-person sense of what people struggle with, what the things that they're concerned about, and how they want AI to work for them, which I think is really, really interesting and very cool, and gives a kind of slightly different insight to perhaps a lot of the people who work on the tech side of AI. And it is worth saying that prior to teaching people about AI, I actually did work in AI myself for about 10 years in conversational AI, building natural language systems. And that led to me becoming a early version of a prompt engineer back when GPT-2 was a thing. And I first started my training teaching other people in conversational AI how to be prompt engineers. And then when ChatGPT came out, they started saying, would you do a version of this for our non-technical colleagues? And that's basically how I ended up teaching people about AI.
Would it be fair to say then that you're an advocate for using AI in a safe and ethical way?
Yeah, absolutely. My kind of whole belief around AI is that whether it turns out to be a net positive for the world or a net negative largely comes down to these couple of years that we are in right now, where we have a chance to shape what it is going to look like before it goes too far. And in order for it to be shaped in a way that is going to be fair and responsible and respectful of humans and humanity in general, I think it's really important that everybody gets a say. And an important part of letting everyone have a say is giving them the literacy and vocabulary to be able to do so. It is so much easier to have an opinion about something if you have actually tried it and used it. And it is not very helpful if you believe it's almost pseudo magic. If we can kind of show you, hey, it's just some math and it's actually not even that complicated. It's just, things stacked upon things, but actually the kind of the basic concepts, the average person can quite readily understand. It demystifies it and it empowers people to say, I think AI could be really useful for this, but I don't think that AI should be used for that. And that's really what I want to see, is a kind of very human first approach to AI rather than a approach where maybe the tech companies are, think we build something that we can then use to displace humans and save lots of money. And I don't necessarily think that that's where we want to end up with this technology.
At the end of the day, like, we humans buy from humans. We like to know who we're dealing with, and we love that human touch. And I think there was a huge moral panic when ChatGPT came on the scene, particularly in the communications and marketing spaces. And like, people are, and still are, I think, Tom, genuinely concerned that, their marketing, their communications jobs will disappear as a direct result of AI.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things one of my favorite things to say is that AI doesn't feel things, okay? Because it doesn't actually have the right mechanics to do so. It doesn't have hormones, whatever else that, we are building with AI systems, we don't have all those kind of chemicals flowing around that are essential for causing feelings. And it is very hard for an AI to make somebody else feel something if it doesn't know what that feels like for itself. I mean, I believe this is why AI will always be at best a pedestrian writer, because it can never feel the kind of the hairs raise on its arm, or the kind of that like chill as you kind of read something that really moves you, because it doesn't have any of the kind of equipment required to feel those things. And so I think that the role of humans is going to remain incredibly important as the kind of the arbitrators of feelings, if nothing else. I mean, I believe that there is more to what humans bring than just that, but that alone should make everyone who works in marketing and communications feel pretty safe and secure, because a big part of marketing is controlling how people feel about a brand. And that bit is really not going to go
And
away.
it's that piece where you create a piece of content, whether it's a video to promote your brand or a blog post where you're trying to evoke an emotion. We're heading into, dare I say it, the festive season. And like, we all in the Western world, at least, grew up with the famous Coca-Cola, the holidays are coming ad, and that sense of excitement that it generated. And, the human touch is very much needed. And I'm mentioning Coca-Cola in particular because they're a company that has actually gone down the AI route and really slimmed down its marketing in order to do that. And, the public don't like it.
No, I mean, exactly. That the kind of the AI version of that advert definitely it has a slightly hollow feeling to it, at least to me. And I think this is exactly gets to the heart of it, of that kind of AI cannot really drive emotion in the same way that a human can. And I also think, this is something that gets missed a lot as well. If you are, and I was running a class last week where one of the attendees happened to be a Sunday Times best-selling author, and so they were quite kind of quite a proficient writer, and they were like, "AI's a rubbish writer," and someone else was in the class was like, "Oh, actually, I think it's not too bad," and I was like, "What you got to remember is that AI is basically taking the training data and then it's producing something like the median of what it's been trained on. And if you are a top 1% writer, clearly you are going to be better than the median. And so you are going to think AI is a worse writer than you. But if you are, perhaps not such a confident writer, writing isn't part of your role, it is quite possible that you are a worse writer. In the same way that everyone believes they're a better than average driver, probably everyone believes they're a better than average writer, but clearly 50% of people have to be worse than average in order for there to be an average. Then AI could be a better writer than you. And I think that this is a really kind of interesting effect, because if you work in a role where you are already substantially better than average at it, you probably aren't expecting AI to be better than you at your job. And in fact, you don't want AI to be better than you at your job, because otherwise it means that your job's going to disappear. But what I think is really exciting and very interesting for all of us is, how does AI help us to be better at the things that we are worse than average at? So, I might have things that I'm not quite so confident in. Everybody has failings, including me. And, those are areas where AI can help to plug the gap to bring me up to a average level across the board. And then I've got my particular strengths in certain areas. And actually, that I think that in the kind of good world, AI can make us all more well-rounded workers. And that actually, I think, is a very interesting and exciting possibility.
In this particular series of Cut Through the Noise, I've been talking with a variety of people about artificial intelligence, from a cyber psychologist and how it might be impacting our critical thinking skills to productivity experts. I'm interested in your perspective on how people who do work in communications and marketing could be leveraging AI, the likes of Gemini, Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever it is, to help us be better at communications and marketing. Because it seems to me that, and I know there's this term of AI slop, and which I don't particularly like, to be totally honest, right? But I do see it all the time myself, where a lot of the average, let's for want of a better way of putting it, of what I'm seeing on the likes of LinkedIn or in marketing posts, it is very generic, and you can spot that it's written by an AI tool. So if we want to use it in a safe and ethical way as part of our comms and marketing work, and we want to do more with it than just making us more productive, what else might we be using it for, Tom?
Oh, that's such a great question. So let me give you a specific example, and I really like this example because it kind of starts off as a productivity boost, but then becomes a value unlock. So we were working with a marketing team of a big multinational firm that has a kind of central global like brand communications team, and then various kind of regional offices that are making their kind of tailored messages for each market. And this kind of global central team that we were working with were very, very frustrated by the amount of kind of email back and forth that they would receive from the regional marketing teams, because the regional marketing teams needed their sign off before something would go live. And there would be huge chains of emails with tweaks, and it was a very, very frustrating process. And so we helped them to create a custom GPT. A custom GPT is just a little mini app that sits within ChatGPT, in order to that the regional marketing teams could put their first draft of their campaign into this custom GPT, and it would give them feedback on how likely or not it was that the central team would sign it off. And it was quite simple to do, didn't take much time. It took us about a day in total to kind of get the whole thing together and kind of battle tested. And then they kind of sent it off to the regional teams. Originally, this whole project had been framed as, can we try and save some of those annoying backwards and forwards emails, i.e., free up some
Yeah.
time of the global marketing team? However, what was quickly observed was that because the regional teams were getting feedback much, much faster from the custom GPT, and then when they actually did send it to the central team to sign off, it was usually getting signed off straight away. Suddenly, instead of them needing a 3-week lead time in order to launch a campaign, they could do it in a matter of days, because they could get feedback. They could work on it during the day, getting feedback from the custom GPT, send it to the global team overnight and get their feedback. And then they could go live for the campaign the next day. And so suddenly their marketing strategy was able to shift from something that was very kind of pre-planned in advance to being much more responsive to what was going on in the market and trends that were taking place. And that allowed them to then start getting more organic earned engagement on their kind of marketing messages. And so they were able to unlock this kind of new way of doing marketing that was more efficient, cheaper, and effective by being faster, even though what originally they were aiming for was just to save some annoying emails. And I think this is a really good kind of way to think about how to use AI in the work you do. If you can find ways to use AI to make you faster, so you are able to take advantage of opportunities that you currently can't, you are going to unlock a whole load of new value that is way, way more than saving a couple of hours on emails.
What though then about, like, and I know copyright and AI, that's it's a major issue, but if you're getting that kind of feedback and you're working with AI in order to create a marketing campaign, then is it really the product of your company? Is it really representing your brand if you're using an AI tool to help you create it in the first place?
So in this specific case, the AI was effectively doing a first line marking of what the kind of regional teams were. So they weren't actually changing the process of creating the campaigns. They were using the AI to give them feedback on the sign off. However, we do see lots of examples of teams using AI to help them come up with marketing campaigns. The current kind of position from kind of what the generally accepted legal position is, I mean, hashtag not a lawyer, but what most people accept is that whoever writes the prompt owns the output. From a kind of an ownership point of view, there's not necessarily a problem using AI in your process. I mean, if you just wrote a prompt and did nothing else, you might have some struggles trying to get it protected yourself. But there's nothing necessarily problematic there, except that you probably won't get a very good result. And at the end of the day, if you are in a marketing team trying to get your kind of brand noticed in the kind of the marketplace of ideas, which is kind of highly contested, and it's hard enough as it is to like break out of the noise, getting kind of something that's 70% good enough, it's not going to get you anywhere. Like, you need to be up in those kind of upper echelons, like, in order to actually be getting traction and attention. And that still needs human creativity. And this is one of the things that we try to teach and encourage in our class, is it's that kind of human AI combination, that kind of push and pull between the two, that creates the kind of the real magic. It's, the spark of insight is often still coming from the human rather than the AI. But the AI is facilitating that, making it easier for the human to have that spark of insight, and help making it easier for the human to turn that spark of insight into something actionable. And I think that is really where we want AI to kind of play a role, rather than trying to replace the whole thing. I mean, the number of people that I speak to, they'll go, "Oh, it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that," and be terribly disappointed that it can't replace their job. And then at the same time tell me that they're worried that AI is going to steal their job. And it's like, actually, we should all be really happy that AI can't do every single part of our role. We don't want AI to do every single part of our role, because otherwise then starts to ask the questions of whether our role should exist. We should be very grateful that that kind of quintessential, insight of something slightly offbeat, that still really needs to come from humans for the moment. And I think that's a good
I
thing.
was speaking to somebody there a couple of days ago about it, and he had decided to start deliberately inputting a grammatical error into LinkedIn posts or blog posts, just so that people could be really sure that he did genuinely write it. Because if it was too perfect, it was too clean, then he felt he was paranoid that it would be seen as being AI generated. And like, I'm wondering then, based on the amount of people that you've worked with on this, and because you were, as the phrase goes, an early adopter to AI, what top tips would you give our listeners and our audience for really getting the most out of these platforms that, let's be honest about it, most of us don't really understand? So any secret sauce for us, Tom?
Well, so number one, you're probably familiar with the fact that the M dash has become the kind of the byword for AI. So if you go into your custom instructions, that's the kind of the personalization section of your ChatGPT account, or Copilot has an equivalent, like all the AI assistants have an equivalent type thing, and tell it not to include an M dash. That will then reduce the amount of M dashes, make it harder to spot. You can train it to write in your own tone of voice. Getting it to as a person will help it be in the right mindset. For example, if you want it to do creative writing, getting it to act as a Booker Prize winning author will get it to write more creatively. Getting it to come up with a plan before it does it. There's literally like millions and millions of techniques. I mean, we do like whole day classes where we teach these techniques. There's almost so many of them, I could reel them off. But I think that the key thing, if people are listening, want to kind of take one thing away, it's play with it. Don't be afraid of it. Play with it. It is by exploring. There's a kind of a really interesting piece of academic literature about AI called The Jagged Frontier, that is basically says that it is very, very difficult to predict what AI is going to be good at and what it is going to be bad at. And the only way to know is to try and find out. And that's what we really need at scale, is people to try and find out what it's good at, but with the mindset that if it can't do it today, it might still well be able to do it in 6 months. When I think about what it couldn't do 6 months ago that it can
Mm.
do now, is quite frightening, the capabilities, how much they've increased. So going with that kind of continuous learning, continuous willingness to play mindset, not kind of thinking, oh, you know, I tried AI once and it didn't work. What it wrote was crap, and therefore I'm not going to give it another chance. You know, you need to go and try some new stuff, because you might be very surprised at how much things have changed in the last year, in the last 6 months, even in the last 3 days. I mean, last week, Google released a new Gemini model that is much better than any of the other AI models at writing at the moment. And if you don't kind of stay on top of some of this stuff, you can miss out on the opportunities, and you can miss out on what's happening. So yeah, I would encourage people to treat AI like a skill that needs to be learned, and to be willing to play and explore and have fun with it, because at the end of the day, this is an incredible moment to be living through. It's like living through the invention of the steam engine. There's this whole change to our world that is about to happen, that is going to, in the long run, make everyone's lives immeasurably better. And it's just about, how do we manage that transition in a way that is positive and rather than negative.
You've reminded me of a man that I used to know when I was a child. He was a plumber. He was in our house doing some work as my parents were renovating the house as a child in the 90s. And I was fascinated by him. He just had, I don't know, there was just something about this guy. So I used to follow him around the house as he was doing his jobs. And I remember him telling me about this thing called the internet, and how he was after finding
Mhm.
his long lost sister who had emigrated to the United States. And he was able to show me on a map the house that she lived on, and how this was like, all of a sudden the world seemed so much less terrifying and so much smaller. And this is a huge moment in our history. It is, again, like you say, the steam revolution, like the internet revolution. We don't yet know what we don't yet know about AI and what it can help us do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the kind of the academic literature on this is really, really interesting, around general purpose technologies. That's where the general purpose gets its name from. General purpose technologies like the steam engine, like electricity, like computers, like the internet. And one of the things that's utterly fascinating is that for a long time after the personal computer had come out and, was in workplaces, there were academic reports saying computers are everywhere, except in the productivity statistics. We can't see any impact in kind of what computing is having on the world that we live in. But it was because it was kind of changing what even needed to be measured. And so it's so hard to know, with something that's kind of brand new and truly transformational, what impact it's going to have, that it's quite easy to miss the impacts it's having until quite a long way down the line.
Now, I know, and I started by asking you about the moral panic, particularly in the marketing sector and communication sector,
Mhm.
as a result of the discovery, really, in the general population of AI. There is also another, and I think potentially moral panic around AI as well, and that's around the environmental impact on it. Because the servers that are used as part of generating all of this information, they are energy heavy. And people are very, very
Mhm.
concerned about the environmental impact of asking ChatGPT for help with cooking tonight's dinner. So talk to me a little bit about that, because this very same people more than likely have about 30,000 photos on their mobile phone and have no problem at all streaming a YouTube video while they cook that dinner.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. That AI is a lot more energy efficient than Netflix. That's for sure. To kind of put it in context, when we go and do a kind of a training engagement with an organization, afterwards, we tend to look for people on average to be using it around 4 times a day. So kind of that's like 4 sessions, not like 4 messages, like four sessions. So kind of 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. And someone doing that will typically use in a week about the same amount of energy as it takes to make half a latte. So in a fortnight, they would use the same energy as making a latte. And if you were to take one less transatlantic flight in your life, that would save more energy than all of your AI usage. And that's assuming that the algorithms remain as inefficient as they are today. And actually, what we know about AI is that the energy usage goes down by a power of 10 like every 18 months. It's like, in terms of the kind of algorithmic efficiency, that's obviously outweighed by the fact that people are using it more at the moment. But these algorithms are getting more and more efficient. And when you look at kind of what's coming down the line in terms of kind of new algorithms that are even more efficient, it's quite reasonable again to expect, a 10 or 100x decrease in energy. And I think that the more interesting questions are what happens when AI becomes so cheap it's almost free. What I try to kind of remind myself with the energy usage side of stuff is that the tech companies have a really strong economic
Yeah.
incentive to reduce energy usage because it allows them to make more money because they have to pay for the energy. You know, they're obviously much more worried about that than they are around these questions of displacing people from jobs or whatever, where they're actually selling a product that they want to do that because that's how they kind of justify selling the product. On the kind of the water usage thing, again, it very much depends on the context. So here in the UK, we don't really use water cooled servers because it's quite cold outside. And so mostly they just they blow in cold air from outside and vent the hot air outside. If you have a data center in like Arizona or whatever, then yes, you need to use water in order to cool it because it's hot outside. But putting it again in context, AI data centers globally use about a sixth of the water of golf clubs globally. So, there are, it's not that AI doesn't use a lot of water, but there are lots of other things in modern life that use a lot of water too. And if we think that there is going to be good kind of value from this and it's going to make a kind of a big improvement in people's lives, then it's probably okay. The key with anything environmental is to like not be
Right.
wasteful with it. And, I think that the things that kind of keep me awake at night are less things around those and more, things around the kind of IP ownership of, these models being trained on people's data. Or, some of the model creators are more or less responsible in the way that they're kind of training those models. And, there are kind of ways of training that are perhaps a bit more efficient, but maybe increase the risk that AI could, do something that we don't want. I mean, the kind of the fear that everyone has is, what if AI makes it easier for people to kind of come up with bioweapons or whatever? And that's the kind of the area where we really want to kind of see the labs being very, very kind of responsible and making a lot of effort against. And also this stuff around sycophancy. I mean, I find this a really kind of interesting area, that these models are designed to make us
Yeah.
happy because they want us to keep engaging
Hmm.
with them. They are metric to the AI companies. At the end of the day, they want us to use their products more. And so they design models that we like to use and that we enjoy to use. And it turns out that we like to use models that tell us that we're right about everything and make us feel smart. And so trying to kind of strike that balance, because if you get it wrong, you get all sorts of strange stories. Like there was a Rolling Stone article earlier in the year about people that had convinced themselves that they were the new messiah based on talking to ChatGPT and it kind of confirming that they were unique and special. And these are the kinds of things that we really need to like be actively thinking about and trying to defend against before we cause a mental health crisis that will make the one provoked by social media look like, just a kind of a drop in the bucket.
Do we then need to regulate and somehow, and I don't know how, globally have consistent regulations? Because children, young people, all of us need to be safe while we're using these tools.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. I suspect that in the kind of the current world, getting global regulation feels difficult, but to me, that doesn't mean that kind of individual countries can't do work to protect their citizens and to try and kind of enforce if you are going to have an AI system that is available in this country, it should meet some kind of standard criteria that I feel is entirely reasonable. And I would like to see governments moving towards that. It's a challenging balance because, in a field that's moving very quickly, you don't want to be kind of too onerous. And I mean, even just last week, the EU has actually just kind of pulled back on some of the EU AI Act because it was being seen as being too onerous and too damaging to any chance of a European competitor to the kind of big AI companies being able to come up. But getting that balance right is going to be really difficult. But as a kind of a real precursor of anything, making sure that we as citizens are broadly informed about how these systems work, what they're good at, what they're bad at, what risks to look out for, feels like really, really important, and something that you can do without any kind of second order weird effects that you get from trying to ban or regulate stuff. So I would personally like to see, as a very first kind of starter for 10, not instead of, but as a kind of starting point, let's make sure that everybody in the UK, in Ireland, in the EU, she understands these systems properly, understands what biases, what hallucinations are, what sycophancy is, that this system does not think for itself. It's like predictive text on your phone, and it works in exactly the same way. It's just trained on more data. Like, try and demystify it a little bit so that it makes it easier for them to say, okay, this isn't working. I can step away from it.
It's all about personal responsibility at the end of the day. And we do have a personal responsibility to make sure that we are literate in any platform that we're choosing to use, because no one is forcing us to do any of these things. At the end of the day, we're still independent human beings and sovereign countries in our own right. Tom Hewitson, I could speak to you all day, and I have kept you for longer than I promised to, but thank you so much.
No, it's fine. I loved it.
And Tom,
Thank you
if
so much.
people would like to find out more about you and General Purpose, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, it's just generalpurpose.com. So yeah, you can find us there. You could also hit me up on LinkedIn if you like. And yeah, please do be in touch. As I said, we're always happy just to kind of chat about AI. And if you want to come on one of our classes, that's great too.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Cut Through the Noise. And that was my conversation with Tom Hewitson of General Purpose. I hope you found it insightful. And I did really like how Tom put into context the sustainability and environmental question when it comes to AI and our use of it. Because at the end of the day, everything that we do by simply existing has an environmental impact. So we need to be aware of it and then make sure, as Tom says, not to be wasteful with it, but also not to cause a moral panic about it either. I found his conversation really useful, and I think the most important takeaway for me was that advice to play with whichever platform AI-wise you choose to engage with. Go back to it again and again. Look at your settings, look at those personalization settings that we've spoken about in previous episodes, but really to, as Tom says, play with it and see how it might benefit you, your brand and your company to make things more efficient and to help you do things to a higher standard. I hope you found the conversation useful. Thank you, as always, for staying tuned to Cut Through the Noise. This is where I ask you to give us a 5-star rating on Spotify or an Apple review, but please do get in contact with me if you enjoyed this particular episode and, of course, Cut Through the Noise overall. And if you'd like help with your communications and marketing, and if you'd like to speak with authenticity, confidence and clarity, then do be sure to get in contact with me through hello@thecommunicationscoach.ie. Don't worry, all of those links are in the show notes below. Thank you very much for listening. Remember, it's a noisy world, so you need to communicate with confidence, clarity and authenticity if you want to stand out from the crowd and cut through the noise.